Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're looking into something a little different. The Laws of Candy.
Interesting title.
It is. And we found it, of course, in the Project Gutenberg archives, which, if you haven't checked it out, seriously, you have to. It's this incredible free online library of ebooks, and you can find anything there.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So, The Laws of Candy, it's a tragic comedy, which is interesting in itself, but it's set in a kingdom where the laws actually punish you for being ungrateful.
Wow,
Which, I don't know about you, but that sounds like it has potential for some drama.
definitely. I mean, just the premise alone makes you think, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
What does it even mean to force gratitude? Is that even possible?
Right. But before we get into all of that, this play is from the early 1600s, so that has to influence the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, picture this. You're in a theater. No fancy sets, no special effects.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all about the words, the delivery, the actors having to create the world with just their voices. The audience has to use their imagination a lot more.
So what would that have been like for them back then?
We have to think about the popular themes back then.
Yeah.
Honor, duty, love, often mixed up with political intrigue and social commentary. It's all very Shakespearean.
Oh, I see. Lots of big emotions, dramatic speeches, maybe some sword fights thrown in.
Exactly. And the laws of candy fits right into that.
I love it. So the summary mentions a father-son conflict, General Cassilanes and his son Antinous, both war heroes, but they clash over who deserves more recognition.
Ah, yes, the classic struggle for recognition. But it goes deeper than just wanting glory. It's about legacy, you know, inheritance.
Mm.
Who gets remembered in the history books? And this isn't just on battlefields, it happens everywhere.
Hmm.
You can imagine General Cassilanes, probably a veteran, fought in tons of wars. He has to be feeling a bit, well, maybe sidelined. You know, his son is this rising star, maybe overshadowing him.
And Antinous the son, maybe a little too eager to take all the credit. That's a recipe for disaster, especially in candy where everyone has to be grateful all the time.
Yeah. That militaristic background adds to the whole thing, too. In a society that's obsessed with honor, any little perceived insult can become a major issue.
And then on top of all of that, the summary mentions political intrigue. We've got Gasparo and this Lord Gonzalo of Venice who was their enemy. This is starting to sound like a spy novel.
Definitely. It's hard to say for sure about Gasparo. We need to look deeper, but with Candy's strange laws, he could be like, I don't know, a gratitude enforcer or something.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
And Lord Gonzalo, well, he's the outsider. His goals probably don't line up with what Candy wants, and that's always going to lead to conflict.
Hmm. Makes you wonder, how does a society that punishes people for being ungrateful treat their enemies? Can you even be grateful in that situation?
Such a good point. It makes you think about what gratitude really means in this world. And of course, there's Princess Rhoda, and where there's a princess, well, there's bound to be some romantic
Oh, I
drama.
know. Love triangles, forbidden romance, maybe even a love potion gone wrong.
Maybe. But don't forget about all those themes we talked about. Honor, duty, ambition. Love can complicate those things.
So Princess Erota, maybe she's caught between Castellanes and Antinous. Or maybe she has her own ambitions and loyalties that clash with everyone else.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Things are getting interesting. But we need to keep in mind the core idea here. How do you even make gratitude into a law? And what even counts as ungrateful in this society? That's what makes this place so unique.
It really is. I mean, can you imagine if there were actual laws about being grateful? What if you don't sound sincere enough? Is that a crime?
It makes you rethink things, for sure. Imagine getting a fine for not saying thank you enough. This play makes us think about whether something as personal as gratitude should be regulated at all.
Mind-blowing. And what would the punishment even be?
It really makes you wonder. I mean, that's a question we'll have to keep in mind as we go. But another interesting thing is that Beaumont and Fletcher, the playwrights, they love to blend genres. It wasn't just straight tragedy. They weren't afraid to add some comedy in there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because we've been talking about all this, ambition, conflict, shady politics, but the title, The Laws of Candy, it sounds so lighthearted, almost like a fairy tale or something.
Right. That's the tragic comedy element. So you'll have moments of humor, witty dialogue, maybe even some satire, all mixed in with the serious stuff. It's a balancing act for sure, but when it's done right, it's really effective.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There are some laughs in there.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it like a well-balanced meal. You have the sweetness of the candy, maybe that's like the rewards of winning or love or something. But then there's a bitter aftertaste too.
Yeah.
You know, the consequences of wanting too much, betrayal, all that messy stuff that comes with trying to fit in.
Okay, I'm starting to get hungry. But I see what you mean. It's that contrast that really makes a story interesting.
Definitely. And we can't forget about the historical context here. We're talking about early 17th century England, and that was a time of big changes.
Oh, right. Shakespeare's time. So was there anything happening back then that might have influenced the play?
Well, just think about the power struggles that were going on. The monarchy versus parliament, everyone fighting for control, that tension, between individual ambition and what society expects. You can see how that might be reflected in the play,
Mm.
especially with characters like Castellani's, Antinous, and Lord Gonzalo.
So the play could be like a commentary on what was happening in politics, a hidden message to the audience.
It's possible. And remember, back then, the theater was a place where people talked about important things. Playwrights would use their work to explore what was going on in society, all disguised as entertainment.
That makes sense. Sneak in some social commentary while keeping people entertained.
Exactly. Make them think. And with a title like The Laws of Candy, it definitely gets people's attention. But shifting gears a bit here, let's think about our listeners for a second. Why should they care about a play written over 400 years ago? What makes this relevant to them?
That's a good question because it's easy to think, oh, that was so long ago, it has nothing to do with me.
But people haven't really changed that much, have they? All those themes in the play, ambition, gratitude, love, betrayal, we still experience those things today.
So even though the setting and the language might seem old, the emotions and the conflicts are still things we can relate to.
Right. When we read these stories, whether it's Greek tragedies or Shakespeare or even this weird tragic comedy, we learn more about ourselves and what it means to be human.
I like that. It's like looking into the past, but also seeing ourselves reflected in it.
Yeah. And The Laws of Candy really makes us think about things we take for granted. What does it really mean to be grateful? Can we really make laws about feelings? And what happens when what we want clashes with what society expects from us? These are questions people were asking back then, and we're still asking them today. The summary mentions a line where Castellane wishes he had youthful heat to bring back his glory. It makes me think his ambition might be coming from a fear of getting older and being forgotten. That's a good point. It's like he's not just ambitious. He's also fighting against time, and maybe even feeling a bit competitive with his own son.
Yeah. So maybe it's not just about power, it's about proving something to himself, like he doesn't want to admit he's getting older.
Exactly. And that makes him a much more interesting character, right? It's
Yeah.
not just black and white, good versus evil. He's a real person with flaws and struggles, and we can all relate to that.
Definitely. And it makes you think about how all those internal struggles would play out in a society that's obsessed with being grateful. It must be so stressful to always worry about showing the right amount of gratitude.
I know. It adds a whole new layer to everything. Imagine trying to deal with your own feelings while also worrying about whether you're expressing enough gratitude. It's like a recipe for disaster.
It's like they're all walking on eggshells trying not to offend anyone.
Makes you glad we don't have to worry about that so much.
I know, right? But it does make you think, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
even though The Laws of Candy takes it to an extreme, it does raise some interesting questions about how we think about gratitude. Yeah, like, are we always sincere when we say thank you? Or are we just trying to be polite?
That's it. We may not have laws about it, but there's definitely a lot of social pressure to be grateful.
Mm.
We do things a certain way because that's just how it's done.
Exactly. Like when you get a gift you don't really like, but you have to smile and say, oh, you shouldn't have. It makes you wonder how much of what we do is just following these unspoken rules.
It's true. We might not think about it, but those expectations definitely influence us.
Okay, so we've talked about the themes, the historical context, the whole tragicomedy thing. But before we wrap up, we have to mention Project Gutenberg again.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, come on. This amazing online library has all these books you can read for free.
It really is a game changer.
Yeah.
Anyone with internet can access all these classic works. It's like having a huge library right there on your computer.
And it's not just old stuff either. They have everything from ancient epics to Jane Austen. So for our listeners out there who want to explore more, what advice would you give them? Where should they start?
Well, I always tell people to just follow what interests them. Look through the different genres, different time periods. Just see what catches your eye. And don't be afraid to try something new. Step outside your comfort zone. You never know what you might find.
That's great advice. And the best part is with Project Gutenberg, there's no risk. You can try out different books, read at your own pace. It's all about the fun of exploring.
Exactly. It's about rediscovering that love of reading and learning new things. And who knows, maybe after reading The Laws of Candy, you'll see the world a bit differently. Maybe you'll start to notice those unspoken rules you were talking about.
I love that. Well said. So to wrap things up, let me leave our listeners with one final thought. We've been talking about gratitude in society, but what if we shift our perspective a little? What if, instead of focusing on the laws, we focus on the candy? What good things can we find in our own lives, even when things are tough? Something to think about as you explore the laws of candy.
I like that. And maybe you'll even come up with some new ideas of your own.
Maybe so. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.